IT, forging IT security experts. Secure Ninja.
Hey everyone, I'm Alicia Webb with SecureNinjaTV, and I'm here at Blackhat 2013 in Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, and I'm with a co-host today, Michael Vien. He is the Chief Hacking Officer for Secure Ninja, so he's a fellow ninja, and we are interviewing Giri Sreenivas. He's the VP and General Manager of Mobile for Rapid7. How are you today?
Doing great.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time out of the busy Blackhat schedule to talk to us.
Of course.
So what does Rapid7 have going on at Blackhat this year?
Well, the big focus for us at Blackhat this year is celebrating 10 years of Metasploit. We're pretty excited to reach this kind of milestone, and so we've got some T-shirts that we're handing out at our booth and events that we'll be sharing there.
10 years of Metasploit.
Yeah.
So here, tell us about your background and your position at Rapid7.
Sure. So I've spent most of my career in the security and mobile industry. I started off working for a startup that was developing the first app stores. We were figuring out how to deliver applications and games and content to mobile phones back in 2000. And that was a startup that was eventually acquired by Motorola. After that, I spent some time in the defense industry. Worked on a number of different security projects for the intelligence community, mostly focused on trusted computing. And then after that, I got back into mobile. Started working on mobile Java and got an early insight into what was going on with Android when a company I was working for was one of the founding members of the Open Handset Alliance. So I got pretty excited about what was going on there. After that, went to T-Mobile and worked on releasing basically all of the early Android phones there, customizing the platform to deliver a T-Mobile experience. When I was there, we started to get some insights into some challenges that companies were having with security around the Android platform and just mobile devices in general. And so that's when I left to start a company with a colleague of mine, Dirk, and we started Mobilisafe. And from there, we launched a product, got into market, got pretty excited about what we were doing, but also got to know the folks at Rapid7 really well, and they approached us about an acquisition, and it made a lot of sense for us to come together. So we were acquired last October. And since then, it's been, things have been going really well, and we're looking forward to continuing to attack the market with our products.
So what generally does Mobilisafe do?
Yeah, so Mobilisafe is a mobile risk management product. And what that means is we really focus on providing companies with 3 key capabilities. The first is getting insight into what kinds of devices your employees are using. One of the things that we learn in the course of spending a lot of time with companies is a lot of them don't understand how pervasive this bring your own device trend is within their organizations. The second thing that we do is help them understand what are the risks associated with those devices. So we calculate something called a trust score, which is an assessment of how trustworthy a given device is. And one of the things that we use to really focus in on that is what's the vulnerability exposure that a device has. And the third thing that we do is, we have a set of controls that provide different sort of mitigation remediation capabilities. So for example, one of the things we like to recommend to our customers is if a device is running an outdated version of firmware, you should think about whether you want to block that device or whether you should automate a policy to remind end users to actually update their devices to the latest version of firmware.
Okay, does that require an agent on the device itself, or?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we actually don't require an agent on the phone. That was one of the sort of unique things that we had when we brought our product out to market. We recognized that there were a lot of solutions that did have that requirement, but you end up with a little bit of a struggle between end users bringing in their own devices and organizations wanting to have insight into what those devices have on them. So we started off with an agentless solution, but just recently released a new capability within our product called App Sentinel. And that actually provides insight into the mobile applications that are running on devices, and that does require an agent to be on the phone.
And that's for where you're polling the apps that are installed on the phone and determining whether or not those apps are compliant or safe within your environment?
Exactly. So, we started off by being able to fingerprint the actual devices without having an agent on the phone. And being able to fingerprint those devices gave us insight into what's the vulnerability exposure. We can do that by taking a look at those fingerprints and looking at a database that we have of thousands of different device configurations. So once we have that vulnerability exposure, the next step beyond that is, okay, what are the different mechanisms for delivering those payloads or for delivering those exploits? And applications are a frequent way that they're being delivered today through malware and whatnot. So we wanted to take that next step and provide that level of insight, given that certain customers are really interested in that for their employees.
Now, when you're talking about the risk thresholds within these different devices and the fingerprinting especially, The fingerprinting, are we talking like the in-map sort of fingerprinting, and how specific is that and how accurate is it?
Yeah.
And then also when you talk about the actual risk thresholds, what type of mitigation strategies do you have? Are they more suggestions or can they be enforced?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first part of your question. So we can get pretty detailed information. For example, we can get down to the level of detail of saying that you're carrying, an iPhone 5 that's running iOS 6.1.4, and that you're coming on from a particular carrier network. So we're in the iOS world, we're very accurate, 100% accuracy. In the Android world, we're about 80% accurate, and we're getting more and more accurate by the day because we're seeing some of the older versions of Android start to fade out. And more versions of these devices are actually running Android 3.0 and 4.0 and above, which helps with our device identification process. So once we have that device identification in hand, your question about, do we have certain kinds of controls, are they suggestions, or can they be enforced? We do both, right? So we recognize that organizations sort of span the gamut, and some of them really want to have a conversation or a dialogue with their employees about what security steps they want to take. And others are going to take a much harder line stance and say, there are certain things we just do not allow or tolerate. And so within our product, for example, you can actually prevent devices from connecting. We take advantage of some native device capabilities also for wiping devices. So if a device presents a certain kind of threat, either because it's been lost or because there's a high-risk vulnerability on that device that you're not comfortable with, you can actually pull your corporate data off of that device as well.
Oh, but now that would be with the agent, I assume.
We can actually do agentless wipes. We take advantage of what a lot of devices support today with native ActiveSync, a mobile device wipe functionality.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So just back to the question of enforcement, does that mean that you're going to a corporation would have to run its own app store marketplace, or would you somehow enforce it to update from the existing repositories of apps?
Yeah, so the app world is just very interesting with what's going on today. You've got employees within organizations that are basically leveraging three kinds of sources for applications. One is an enterprise app store, right, which may or may not be deployed, may not be running. Then the second category that we look at are trusted app stores, right? So trusted commercial app stores like Google Play and the Apple iOS App Store. And then you have this third bucket of sort of untrusted app sources. This could be an application that's sent to you as an attachment in an email, something that you download off of a website, or a third-party app store that maybe hasn't been verified or trusted. So what we do is we want to provide some insights for our customers to understand, first of all, is this an application that you can trust? Is it coming from a place where we know that there's been some vetting of the application? Because, for example, Apple does a pretty good amount of vetting before an application is allowed for download. Google's gotten better about this. It used to be, a lot more of the wild, wild west, but with programs like Bouncer, they're taking some steps to make sure that they're starting to flag certain kinds of applications whose intent is solely malicious.
Right. Yeah, but it's still, you've got the onus on the user. If they choose to install apps on an Android device that are not from a trusted marketplace, then does your app handle those as well? Yeah,
so what we look at it as, it's a little bit of, carrot and stick, right? Mm-hmm. And so for the end user, if they're going to take advantage of some of those capabilities on their device that present material risk to corporate data, then the organization has the ability to block that end user, right? And so the motivation for the end user to comply is to be productive on their device, right? And so if you want to have access, then you can comply. If you really want to do these other things, you want to take advantage of some kind of application or game that doesn't come from a trusted source, then there's a trade-off there, and you may not be able to be as productive with your device. Right. And this is one of the ways that we tend to think about bring your own device a little bit differently than the rest of the market. We recognize that there really is a spectrum, and that organizations are not all going to fall into the same category where they want to have the same level of control, the same level of restrictions across every device, whether it's corporate-owned or personal.
Now, I noticed you didn't mention the Windows OS or the Blackberries. Do you have products for those, or are you looking to go into those areas? Yeah, so with our agentless approach, we actually do support Windows devices, BlackBerry devices, Symbian devices. We tend to see very few of them. They're not really doing so great in terms of market share amongst the customer base that we're focused on. What's very interesting to us with the introduction of BlackBerry 10 is that there was native ActiveSync support, right? And what that means is rather than having the BlackBerry device go to a Bez server and then go and fetch email that way, the device could be configured to go directly to the Exchange server.
which is how we get some of the insights into these devices. So we absolutely support more than just iOS and Android. It just so happens to be that it's about 95% of the devices we see.
Understood.
Yeah.
So would you say that there's one OS that's better than another, that's kind of like your go-to for companies' needs?
Yeah, so we look at the question kind of in two different lights, right? One is for corporate issued devices, what kind of platform should organizations really be focused on? And we're seeing, just in terms of capabilities, that iOS is just a very manageable platform. There's great tools out there for it. It's great, in terms of end user acceptance. And so when organizations are looking at buying corporate fleets of tablets or phones, iOS devices tend to be accepted very well and tend to be managed very well. From a pure security perspective, when we take into account that there's a mix of corporate issued devices and bring your own devices, what's interesting is we find there's quite a few vulnerabilities in the iOS world as well. In fact, we see it's roughly 50-50 between iOS and Android. So it's not that one platform is more secure than another platform from a vulnerability risk perspective. But in terms of how the end users are accepting the platform, how those devices can be managed and controlled, particularly with respect to corporate issued devices where stricter controls can be more accepted by the end user. Because at the end of the day, the end user recognizes this company is providing this device to me, they can manage it however they want to. iOS devices have tended to fare well in those situations.
What would you say is like the biggest thing that an end user can do to protect their phone?
Yeah, so the number one step that we recommend is put a PIN code on your device, right? That's the easiest policy to just get on your device. It's surprising the number of people that actually lose their devices. We found 25 to 30% of sort of younger working professionals in this 25 to 40 demographic are losing their mobile phone at some point, whether they leave it in a taxi, at a restaurant, whatnot. Exactly. Yeah. If you're not the Apple engineer that left in the bar. Yeah. So the easiest thing you can do is you put a PIN code on that device. With iOS, that enables some encryption, so you're protected from some attacks that way. You can actually turn on the PIN and enable encryption on your Android device, so that'll take a little bit of time to go through the encryption process. But those proximity attacks can be mitigated by that. Now, all of that said, from a corporate data perspective, there are still quite a few proximity attacks. In fact, one of the things that we've gone through and spent a lot of time with our customers on is, even though you're reminding your end users to update to the latest version, Apple has been having a lot of sort of recidivism with these proximity attacks. And so even with the iOS 7 beta release that we've seen, we're actually seeing repeats of those attacks being applicable to that operating system. So it's a good step to protect, across most attacks. But if someone's very determined, they're typically going to, be able to find a way eventually.
Now, does a user jailbreaking their phone have any effect on the way that your software works?
It absolutely does. So with our agentless approach, we're able to fingerprint some devices and determine that they're jailbroken, even though we have no software that runs on them. That's a minority of devices, though. So one of the things that we're looking at longer term is how can we take a look at our App Sentinel capabilities and include some of that awareness of a device being jailbroken. It's a very tricky problem. When I was doing work earlier in the trusted computing space, one of the core challenges that we had was determining whether or not a system had been tampered with. And if it had been tampered with, don't allow the system to actually boot up. Just shut it off and don't allow access. There are some steps being taken forward in the mobile space to support some of these same capabilities, but they're not there yet. So it's possible for a device to be jailbroken, and for a number of techniques that rely on different approaches to detect jailbreak activity to not be successful in detecting that. So what we work on with customers and we help them understand is, look, there are different ways that we can help you and other products can help you determine that a device has been jailbroken, but you cannot rely on them being 100% bulletproof, that just because something tells you it's not jailbroken, that it's not 100% the case. You have to take into account other kinds of factors, like, for example, where is the device connecting from? Can you have a discussion with the end user about whether the device has been lost or misplaced in some way, shape, or form? So
when I forgot what you called the rating system that you give the trust.
The trust score.
Trust score.
Yeah.
So on the trust score, does having a jailbroken phone give it more of a risk score then?
Absolutely, yeah. So we look at jailbroken devices as being less trustworthy than non-jailbroken devices in general. There are a few exceptions to that, not necessarily things that we account for with a trust score, but things that we're seeing for example, in the Android space. So Recently, there was the master key vulnerability that was revealed by one of the vendors, and they're going to be talking about that later at a Blackhat session. What we've seen is that that vulnerability has actually been patched in an open source sort of customized version of Android that can be flashed onto jailbroken devices faster than manufacturers have actually patched the device. And part of the challenge is an ecosystem challenge. Google makes the patch available, then the handset manufacturers have to take that patch and customize it for their distributions of Android. They have to go through a carrier qualification process so that all of the carriers are comfortable with the patch before it gets pushed out. And so we've seen some manufacturers start to get those out, but the vast majority have not. And so this is a situation where it's a severe risk. There is CyanogenMod ROMs which are out there which actually have it patched, and they're running on jailbroken devices. So it's a tricky situation. The way that end users should be looking at it, and that's where we focus on having that dialogue rather than just being prescriptive about it's all about one score and that's the end of the story for you.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely great information.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. Do you have any more questions or? Yeah, and wait, I have a question. You guys are having a party tonight, I hear?
That's right. Yeah, every year we have a big bash for Blackhat, and so. Starts at 8 o'clock tonight. We're pretty excited for it.
Awesome. Well, have fun at that. I'm definitely going to try to come by.
All right.
Yeah, but definitely thanks for speaking with us, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Good luck with everything you're doing, and maybe we'll follow up in the future.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Make sure you subscribe to SecureNinjaTV's YouTube channel so you don't miss anything that's going on at Blackhat or DEF CON. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, all that good stuff. I'm Alicia Webb. This is Michael Vien. Thank you for watching.
Secure Ninja Shorts are brought to you by SecureNinja.com, a world leader in information security and IT training and certification. Our master instructors will help build you into a highly skilled and marketable security professional. SecureNinja.com, forging IT security experts.